we should find him in our local assembly as we come in to worship and to praise him and leave to serve. And we should not be surprised to find God at church. Y'all are hearing what I'm saying. That I want you to understand that here it is. Zechariah wasn't the first man that is recorded that was surprised to find out that God was in the temple. Y'all do understand that Isaiah was one that was there in the temple, that was going about his priestly duties, and he found that God was in the temple. In fact, what he said was, he written in his word was that in the year that King Uzziah died, I first saw the Lord. And he was high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. And one of the things that we need to understand is that Isaiah saw God there at the temple as he was going about his priestly duties, as he was doing that which he had done before, but now had something happened different. He got the opportunity to see God. See, the thing I want to understand is that when we enter into God's presence, we should come in with the expectations of seeing and having visitation from him. I've come to understand that there are those who have been burdened, has gone through some difficult weeks, had some difficult relationships, had some difficulty on their jobs, had some difficulty during sickness, have had difficulty during loss of loved ones, have had difficulty with neighbors, and have had difficulties all about our regular day. And we need to come, when we come into the presence of God, we come in with expectation to see him. But here's the thing I want to understand is that when we see him, don't be surprised. See, the thing I want to understand is that when you come to God's house, you should expect to see God. Woo! But you have to be prepared to see God. One of the reasons I found that people don't see God when they come into their closets, or they go into their prayer life, or they go into their places of expectation, is because they come in with the idea that I can come in and do this for a period of time and leave, and no one will know the difference. I don't have to change anything. Do you believe in your mind that sample sanctified imagination? I believe, and perhaps you may believe, that if Zechariah had known that the angel was going to show up that day, he would have did something a little bit different. See, I don't want to watch this. I don't know about you, but I live in expectation every single day. And in living in expectation every single day, when I pray to God, I expect God to answer me. See, the thing that we would need to understand is that a lot of us are programmed to respond immediately to things that happen. So therefore, when God don't respond to us immediately, we act as though he hadn't heard our prayer. See, the thing I want to understand is God hears every single prayer. Now, because God don't react in the way that you want him to react, doesn't mean that God doesn't hear it. See, sometimes the reason why we're not getting through to God is not God that's the problem, it's we are the problem. Sometimes we need to reboot ourselves. Watch this. And the reason why we need to reboot ourselves, we've been overloaded with other stuff. I've come to realize that there are times when I have so much stuff on me, I got so many things going on, till it's not God that's not hearing me, it's me that's not hearing God. And so what I need to do is I need to reboot myself. I unplug myself from all those other things. Just totally shut down just temporarily. And when I totally shut down just temporarily, what happens is there's still just enough power left inside of me where God will reboot me to get me back to where I need to be. Watch this. See, watch this. Some of y'all missing that. Well, let's go back to your appliances. I have televisions, and I have computers, and I have radios, and I got different components. And what happens is there are times when they get overloaded. And when they get overloaded, what happens is I begin to look at the manual, and I find out in the manual told me I need to reboot. And so what I did was I tried to figure out what does it mean by rebooting. Well, I'm glad you asked. In the manual, what it tells you is cut off the power supply to that particular component. And when you cut off the power supply to that particular component, what happens is everything that it used to do, it goes back to where it was programmed to be in the beginning before you put all that other stuff in it. See, the problem with a lot of us is the reason why we're not hearing God is because we got so much other stuff on our plate. My job on my plate, my position on my plate, my relationship on my plate, my bills on my plate, my position in life on my plate, my companion on my plate, my children on my plate, my money or lack of money on my plate, my sickness on my plate, what the lawyer said on my plate, my court date on my plate, what the jury may say on my plate. All these things are on my plate that causes me to be disconnected from God. Here it is. We find that Zechariah was inside of the temple working just like he always worked. In fact, he was doing his godly duties. His job was to light the incense inside of the temple. And so what he was doing was just what he was supposed to do. And he did it, just like he always did it. On the outside of the temple, there were some things that was going on. There were people that were waiting on him on the outside of the temple. As they were waiting on him on the outside of the temple, they weren't just sitting there or standing there waiting. They were praying for him while he was inside of the temple. And what happened was, the old historians say that they would tie a rope around the priest that would go inside of the temple. And as he was inside of the temple carrying out his priestly duties, they were outside of the temple praying. And so what they would do was they would put a bell also on the rope. And as he moved around in the temple, they could hear him in there moving around, because as long as the bell began to charm and kept charming, they knew that everything was all right. And so what happened was the people noticed something. Here it is. What Zechariah is staying in the temple a little bit longer than what we know that it takes to light the incense. And so what they begin to get a little bit concerned. See, some folk begin to complain about you being in church a little bit too long. You were there on Monday, you came back on Tuesday, you were there on Wednesday, you came back on Thursday, and then lo and behold, even on Friday night over at Mount Moriah, they got something going on. And then Saturday, you got to come back. And then all of a sudden, I'm back at Sunday, and I'm back at church again. Y'all looking at me strange. See, we got some folk that tell you that you're in church way too much. Well, I come to let you know what church does is church connects me with the Spirit of God, with a group collectively. I worship him individually, and he connects me also collectively. And so what happens is when I come into the building, I don't come in to get saved. I come in because I am saved. Y'all hear what I'm saying? And so when I come into the building, I come into the building because this is as close to heaven on earth as I'm going to get. Don't you understand that God has already told us in his word he's coming back for the church without spot or wrinkle? Good God Almighty. And if he's coming back for the church, I want you to understand something. We're not talking about this brick and mortar. What we're talking about is your soul. We're talking about you. But here's the thing is, the brick and mortar is where all the people, the saved, baptized believers in Christ, come assemble themselves. Now, here's the thing that's going to bust your bubble. If you're tired of going to church here on earth, you better not think about going to heaven, because that's why God is, and that's why he dwells on heaven and on earth. And so if you're tired of him on earth, woo! If you've already gotten tired of coming in to worship because you come to church way too much, y'all looking at me strange. Maybe you're quiet because you know I'm telling the truth, or maybe you're the one that's telling some of the others. But see, I want you to understand something. I've had folk tell me, you're at church way too much. Well, I come, that's why the closer I get to God, the more I want to be at church. The closer I get to God, the more I want to be around his people. The closer I get to God, the more I want to have fellowship. Hey, and so therefore, I come because I am saved. And I come because there's someone that come that need to be saved. And when they come and need to be saved, there need to be somebody in here that's already saved, that's going to help them to become saved. And so what do you think would happen if if visitors came to church and there was nobody there? How would they get to hear a word from the preacher? How would they get to hear a word from the teacher? How would they get to hear a word from the Sunday school? How would they get to hear a word from Wednesday night if each time they came, the doors were closed? I come to let you know that God has given us an assignment, and our assignment is to work until he comes. I expect him to come every single day, but I'm prepared to keep on working if he don't come. He's not on my time, he's on his time. So Zechariah was inside of the temple doing his regular priestly duties. And when he was in there doing his regular priestly duties, he looked on the right side of the altar and he seen something. He seen an angel standing on the right side of the altar. And he watched it. And here it is. He had fear because he looked and he seen an angel inside of the temple. If you're going to see an angel anywhere, a temple should be the first place that you ought to start looking for him. In fact, I come into God's house with expectation of seeing God. I come into God's house with an expectation of having visitation. I come into God's house with the expectations of hearing from God. I come into God's house with the expectation of getting this message. I come into God's house with the expectation of having an assignment. I come into God's house with the expectation of leaving the house of worship to serve. Here it is.